Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Now, you know what? When I get a response like that, I always figure like I'm in Pontiac or Saginaw or something like that. Let's try that again. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, that sounds so much better because I was told that this was a group of either existing or aspiring entrepreneurs who want to start a business or have a business that they want to grow. And they found out that Detroit City Council President Brenda Jones and your at-large council member Janae Ayers were having a series of events to help you to grow your business. So this is part of our small business empowerment series, and we've been having these sessions all over town. We're having one here today to talk about grant writing and funding, which for many businesses is that lifeblood that keeps your idea in your pocket and not out on the street where you can fill your pocket. So we thought that we would bring together some great resources. We have some folks here from Fifth Third Bank. We have some other funders that are here from DESC. We have a gentleman from, please tell me your new business again, sir. The Crispen Group. The Crispen Group as well, who's going to help us. And Wendy, where's Wendy? What's your organization, Wendy? D-Source. So we have some folks that are going to give you some very good information about funding, grant writing. How do you prepare your organization to get that money? Somebody say, get that money. Get that money. Somebody say it again. Get that money. So we're hoping that through this session that you'll be able to understand how to put the things together that you need to put together to take your idea from your mind to a funder and do what? Get that money. That's right. So I will let you know, I'm sorry, I did not introduce myself. My name is Stephen Grady, and I'm Chief of Staff for your Detroit City Council President, Brenda Jones. And in a moment, our Council President is going to make some opening remarks. We're doing this series as the at-large council members. So Council President Brenda Jones and Council Member Janae Ayers are both your at-large members. That means that they are responsible for the entire city. So you know how you'll have district council members that are in a district, but council members Jones and Ayers are over the entire city. Now just a little bit of housekeeping for ladies and gentlemen just outside that door there. If you need the facilities, they're right outside the door. And as I'm understanding, after we kick off this first presentation, we're going to ask everyone to sign up. Our sign-in sheets, right? And then after we have the presentations, we're going to have 3 breakouts. One will be in here, one will be in the next room, and one will be in the other, and they'll explain that. Then throughout the evening, you will be able to schedule a free. Somebody say free. Free. You didn't say it like they do it on the ad. Free. Somebody's going to be able to do a free 30-minute consultation on what you need to know with these experts that we have in-house. We got DEGC here as well. So without further ado, oh, there's one other thing. No, I think Council President probably will talk about what's going on with her. I have to put my phone down. Turn my phone. Oh, okay. This gentleman here wants to make sure everybody knows. No ringing phones in the room. Turn your phone down on mute. Yeah, you can give that a round of applause, sure. But we're here to learn. We're here to share. We're here to exchange ideas. But most importantly, we're here to what? Get that money. Get that money. So without further ado, it gives me great pleasure and honor to introduce to you your Detroit City Council President, the Honorable Brenda Jones.
Good afternoon to everyone, and First of all, I want to thank everyone for being here. In the absence of my colleague, Councilmember Janae Ayers, and her father made his transition, and so she is at home doing the things that she needs to do to handle the transition of her father. And so please keep her and her family in prayer as she move forward. I'm not going to take up almost no time because Stephen has basically told you everything that you need to know, and you're not here to hear from me. You're here to actually hear from the professionals that are here today to talk to you about grant writing. And so again, I welcome you. I thank you for being here. I look forward to everyone who want a grant, get the information that you need, put in for that grant, and get that money. As we continue to move this city forward. So again, thank you for being here. Councilmember Ayers and myself stand available at all times to help and assist you at any point of anything that's going on throughout this city. So again, thank you for being here, and we're gonna move on with the show. Oh, one thing I forgot to do. I forgot to thank our media people for being here. We know that all the time you don't get everything you need. Sometimes you miss something. This will be videoed. If you miss something, you can purchase that video, as well as we also know that everybody can't make it. And so they'll be able to get this information as well. So I thank our media service people who have worked all day, but still come here to help the community and help the people get the things that they need. So thanks to the media who is here to do what we need to do to make sure everybody gets the information that they need. And thank everyone who is presenting. Thank my team as well as Councilmember Ayers' team.
Thank you, ma'am. Sure, you can put your hands together. Absolutely, because this is a great opportunity. And I've got one more speaker that's gonna come give a few comments on behalf of Councilmember Ayers, and also he's going to introduce kind of our next speaker, and that's Mr. Jerome Record. Give him a round of applause. Thank you, Jerome.
You're welcome. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jerome Record. I am the community liaison for at-large Councilmember Janae Ayers. She sends her deepest regards and everything. Thank you all for coming out today. As Council President explained, she's dealing with the passing of her father, so she couldn't be here today. But she definitely is happy to know that you all are here today. This was something that was very important to her, being from the community, that we connect our nonprofits, our block clubs, our neighborhood associations, our CDCs, with the proper groups to help expand your operations in the community. Because we know as partners and legislators here in the community, it's important for us to partner with you all. So we definitely commend you all for taking the first steps and coming out and getting this information today so that you can take action back home in your own communities. So on behalf of Councilwoman Janae Ayers and staff, we just want to say thank you all, and make sure that you all take some good notes, ask questions, and get that money. All right. And so next up, I would like to introduce Wendy from D-Source. She's going to be our first presenter. Could you all give Wendy a round of applause, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Jerome, and thank you, Council President Brenda Jones, and thank you, Janae Ayers, for letting us be here today and share this wonderful information with all of you. How's everyone doing tonight? All right, good to hear, good to hear. So like Jerome mentioned, my name is Wendy Caldwell-Liddell. I'm from D-Source. D-Source is a organization that helps nonprofits and small businesses find funding, build themselves, and establish a foundation that can essentially make them able to use their resources wisely in the community. So our company values are based in 3 areas. The first being integrity, which we'll talk more about later in the presentation, but essentially highlighting ensuring that the grant writers that you work with, the people that you hire to do your grants, write your proposals, hold integrity. And like I said, we'll talk about that a little more later. But then there's opportunity and partnerships. And both of these things are extremely important because in terms of making sure that your organization can reach as many people as possible and have the impact that you're looking to have in the community, one, you need to be connected to the right opportunities. And secondly, you need to make sure that your partnerships are properly aligned so that you can access as many resources as possible that are available to you. So I'm here today to inform you guys of the 3 keys to success that you'll need in order to be successful in your endeavors. And those are funder matchmaking, grant writing, and then your organizational foundation. So these 3 tools all work together essentially to build one big pie. As you can see here, you can't really have one without the other. You can have a great grant writer, but if your organization doesn't have a good foundation, the other 2 pieces don't work. You can find great funders who are willing to fund your programs, but if you can't find somebody who can articulate those ideas, or if you can't yourself articulate those ideas, once again, the pie does not work. So today is about making sure that your organization, your foundation, your principles are all built and making sure that you fulfill all 3 pieces of this pie. So starting with organizational foundation, which is, to me, the most important piece of the pie. Now, I mentioned that all 3 pieces are equal, so no one piece is more important than the other, but your organizational foundation is the key piece that you need in order to showcase not just foundations, but your community, the people that you serve, the people that you want to support you, volunteer for you, that you have what it takes to fulfill your desires in the community. And so how do you start? How do you establish an organizational foundation? It starts with your why. How many of you have ever heard, what's your why before? You guys have heard that before? Great. Establishing your why, a big part of doing that is to figure out, what your reason is for existing in the community. What brings you to life? What are your strengths? Where do you add the greatest value? Not just where you add value, but where does your organization fit best in this larger piece of the puzzle that we're thinking about? And then also, how do you measure success? And we'll talk about measuring success later in the presentation a lot more, but these are all things that you need to think about from day 1. These are not day 10, day 60, day 1. You need to ask yourself these 4 questions. And if you can't answer these 4 questions today, come see me. So by a show of hands, can I ask how many people in this room have an organization that's been in existence a decade or longer? All right, 5 years or longer. Okay, so who's just getting started out? All right, all of you need to come see me. Everyone who's just getting started needs to come see me and make sure that you attend the breakout session so that we can make sure that you guys have all the tools that you need to be successful. And shout out to all of you that have been in existence 5 and 10 years. You're doing something right. So determining readiness is a big part of establishing your foundation. So when you move on from your why, there are a few things that you need to figure out about your organization to determine, are we stable? And those things are defining your community need, clearly establishing your mission and your vision, proactive budgeting, making sure that you have a 501c3 tax exemption, demonstrating success, and then making sure that you fulfill all of your local, state, and federal reporting requirements. And if anybody in this room who has done a grant before, I'm sure you all can confirm, if there is no other question that a funder will ask you, all of these things on every grant application come up in one way or another. So having the answers to these questions from the get-go, before you even go after money, before you start doing work in the community, that's only going to help you in the long run. And so in terms of establishing what the community need is, a lot of the times, we see an issue in our community. I know over where I live, in a lot of places in Detroit, we have a lot of vacant houses, a lot of abandoned houses. You have a lot of people that are homeless. And so you say to yourself, I want to get involved. I want to make sure that I can provide housing for people. But beyond a problem that you can see in your community, you have to at some point be able to articulate that problem to someone and explain to them how you're not only going to help solve it, but what are the exact issues that exist. And so that goes far beyond saying, I see that there's no housing, and it takes it a step further to say, what data and research do I have available to my disposal that can help me tell this story? Because those are the things that funders are looking for. And so moving from there, we mentioned establishing your mission and your vision. So your mission is what are you doing now? What are you doing today? What is your work? Your vision is that long range. So we talked about housing, right? So your mission with housing is, let's say, to make sure, that homeless people in the community have somewhere to stay. Your vision might be long range to eliminate homelessness in the community. So the mission, once again, covers what you're doing today. The vision is that long-term goal that you're planning to achieve, but they both come back at the end of the day to your values. And your values are, once again, it goes back to that why, that foundation that your organization has that determines, that's the reason that you exist. So then there's budget development, and I'm not going to harp too much on this because these are all things that we're going to cover in our breakout session. But a lot of times I work with clients who, the budget is the hardest part to build. It's a very daunting task for a lot of people. But essentially, when you think about a budget, I'll leave you guys with this. Think about everything you spend your money on. And a lot of you probably do budgets for your house. If you had to do a budget for a week, you're probably going to think about, okay, gas to drive to school, clothes, food. Every single thing that you can imagine that you spend your money on, line item it, and that's essentially your budget. And it's the same thing with your organization. Everything that you can imagine that you'd have to spend money on is what goes into your budget. If you can start there, you can do a budget. I promise it's not that hard. So then there's choosing the best option for your organization in terms of how you're established. So you have 501c3 establishment, and then you have organizations and agencies that choose, or I should say groups that choose to partner. And in this case, you have to determine for yourself what's the best option for you. So I see a lot of you already have your 501c3 designations, but for maybe some of those of you that are just getting started out, you're wondering, what? The cost of a 501c3 is high. I can't afford that. And, that's going to take away from money that I need to fulfill my mission and my vision right now. So what other options do I have to still achieve my goals in the community? And a great option for that is to get a partner or a fiscal sponsor. But of course, there are pros and cons that come with both. And just like cost and paperwork are an issue with the 501c3, then you have the cons of dealing with partners, which may include that they're difficult to find, finding partners that have a shared mission and vision with you. And then this here tends to be the kicker for a lot of organizations, which is once you have a fiscal sponsor, they tend to have more control over your project. So that's why it's so important that if you're going to choose to work with a fiscal sponsor to receive your grants on your behalf, that it's an organization that you trust. And so how do you find an organization that you trust? Well, that's a question that you have to answer. But I can tell you this, if you have to question whether or not they should be the one in front of your grant, they probably shouldn't be the one in front of your grant. So how do you measure success? Now, this is important. And once again, going back to those day one things that we should all be thinking about, measuring success is day one. Because once again, these are all things that funders are going to ask you about once you start to ask for money, and you have to know ahead of time how you're going to do these things. Once again, it's one thing to say, I'm going to eliminate homelessness in my community, but the real question is, how do you know you made an impact? And making an impact is not putting people in houses. I mean, you would think it is on the surface of it all. It's like if people got in houses and I made an impact, right? Maybe not. What if they were only in your house for 30 days and then something went wrong with the house? So you have to think about all those things. Measuring success is dependent on consistent tracking and record keeping, and then also things like pre and post surveys. So measuring people when they come into your programs and saying, hey, how old are you? How much money are you earning? What are you doing with your life right now? And then repeating those same things when people leave your programs so you can say, okay, well, how much money do you earn 6 months after you started working with us or a year after, and seeing if the income increased, Where do you live now versus where you live after the program completed? Where were you employed when the program first started versus where are you employed now? What was your education level when you first got here versus what it is now? And so those pre and post surveys and that pre and post work is really important in terms of figuring out if you're truly making an impact in the community. And doing this work ahead of time, doing this work before you even go for a grant, can really set you up for a ton of success in the long run, because then when it comes to applying for a grant, you don't have to sit down and do all the paperwork and figure out where did we make an impact. You're going to already have it readily available because you did consistent tracking. So once again, something that we'll cover more in our breakout sessions. So this is something I just want to breeze through. Local, state, and federal reporting. I'm sure those of you that have been in existence for a long time know a whole lot about this, but making sure that you're adhering to that reporting is key, because you want to make sure that you can go back to funders year after year and ask for money, and they are going to want to fund organizations that are good with doing their paperwork, because if you can't do your paperwork every year, can you spend my money right? Probably not. So that's the basis of organizational foundation. That, I promise, is the longest part of this presentation. And so now we're going to go into funder matchmaking, which is the second piece of this pie. So finding funders that are a good fit for you. 50% rule. How many of you know about the 50% rule? Oh, no one, huh? So the 50% rule essentially says that 50% of what happens behind a grant maker's doors are out of your control. That means that you can pay a grant writer $250 an hour. You can have the best program in the city of Detroit, and 50% of what happens to your grant is still outside of your control. And so to that end, we have to figure out what is in my control. What is it that I can make sure, if I can control it, that I can make sure that it's at top notch when it reaches that funder's table, so at least we know we didn't leave anything on the table. And so understanding those other two pieces, those other two 25%, the first one is, once again, finding the right funders. So once again, let's go back to that example of housing. If your goal is to eliminate homelessness in the community, a funder like Kresge probably won't be your best bet. So you want to know, you ask why, because you see Kresge doing a lot of work in the community, and you think, well, Kresge does a lot of community development work, why wouldn't they be a great funder for homelessness? Well, Kresge likes planning projects, they like art projects, they like community development. If your goal is to eliminate homelessness, you need to look for funders that care just as much about getting people off the street as you do. So finding the right funders is seriously one of the biggest keys, because I can't tell you guys how many clients I have that bring me big grants when they see them come up, and I would love to help them apply, but my job is to make sure that you're connected to the right people as well. So once again, your funder should be just as passionate about your values as you are. If you look at a funder's priorities and they don't match up with what your mission, your vision, and your values is, go to the next funder. I promise you, there are so many funders out there, you will find one that's a good fit for you. But don't waste your time applying, and doing applications for funders that probably won't fund your programs, because grant writing ain't cheap. So that covers funder matchmaking. So now I know you guys are all asking, all right, Wendy, so how do we get to the money? Now, you've told us about all these things we need to do to get ourselves in line and finding the right funders. So once we do all that, how do we get the money? Well, that's what this resource fair is about, grant writing. Quality grant writing is that other 25%, plain and simple. Having experienced quality grant writers at your table that know how to walk you through developing a proposal, that understand the creative writing process, that can take a funder's priorities and your values and make them so in sync that they read seamlessly behind a grant maker's table. And that's about that other 25% that you can control. What you can control is making sure that the team that's putting together your proposals and your grants, that they're so high quality that at the very least, that 50%, you've got that in the bag. And so once again, just going back to the point about having quality grant professionals at your table, I encourage everyone in this room, if you have not yet before, to visit grantprofessionals.org. Their website provides a lot of resources on ethics, primarily, which I love. Often I get questions about, hey, Wendy, will you write a grant and take 10% off the grant? No, and if you guys have ever worked with grant writers that have taken 10% of your grant, stop. Your grant writers have to operate under a certain code of ethics, and the reality is, if you're working with a grant writer that operates any other way than these ethics state here on this website, then they probably aren't being ethical in a lot of other ways that they're preparing your proposal. So you have to think about that. And so I'm not going to harp too much on it, but I encourage you guys to visit that website and learn more. If you're hiring grant writers, if you're working with grant professionals, and learn more about what it is that they should be adhering to. And if they can't tell you anything about this website, once again, you probably shouldn't be working with them. And so, once again, going back to that point, your grant writer should be able to help connect you to the right funders, understand the grant making process, and ultimately write great grants. And we'll cover all of this more in depth in our breakout sessions. So those are the three fundamentals. Once again, all of you who are just getting started here today, make sure you come see me. I will be in, I think that's conference room B over here. Make sure you come sign up. And that's it. You can contact me in my email. Thank you all. All right, so Keith Crispen from the Crispen Group is next to talk about fund development.
Fun development. I promise it's more exciting than what it sounds like. Thank you all for coming here tonight. Thank you, City Council, my colleagues Wendy, Jason, everybody who made this event possible. Appreciate it. I'm going to go through a few main points. My style of slides is different. I see a lot of people with their phones out taking pictures. Since I'm a consultant, I care deeply about the intellectual property I put on these slides. But I've already made an agreement with Jasmine from the City Council office, and we're going to make sure that I get you full slides with information on them by Monday, as well as if you contact City Council and Jasmine specifically, she'll be able to get them over to you tomorrow, okay? So, again, my name is Keith Crispen. I am a management consultant. I head a firm up where we connect startups and nonprofits to capital. I've been doing so since 2009, and I do want to share some things about myself because I feel like it's very important for a crowd to know exactly who they're who's giving them advice and guidance and resources and structure around some of the things they're looking to do. So I'm just going to spend some time on me briefly. So again, my name's Keith Crispen, born in Detroit, raised in Detroit, educated in Detroit, went to Wayne State and University of Detroit Mercy, so I got my education here in the city. I do some volunteer work where I'm the president of Detroit Young Professionals. I'm also a development director of another organization, AIGA Detroit. Something that you might be interested in. Since 2009, I connected startups to $19.2 million in startup capital. And since 2011, I've connected nonprofits to 4.85 in unrestricted funding, which is key, and I'll talk to you about what that is later, okay? So today, I'll be covering a few basics. So the major areas of coverage for me will be fundraising and fund development. So fundraising and fund development, okay? Fundraising, I'll go through different types of fundraising, different types of fundraising events that organizations can hold. Some of you may be aware of some of these. Some of you may even have taken part in them before as a participant, but never as from an organizational standpoint. And then we'll go through some other fundraising options as technology and laws evolve, some new opportunities to fundraise that become available. And I want to go over those briefly. And then anybody who's interested in talking more about those things and how to put them together, you can come see me during a breakout session. And then fund development. So programmatic alignment is key. We'll talk about what that is, why it's important. Some of you may have heard the term before, some of you may not have. Relationships and strategic alliances. Wendy hit on that somewhat, and that goes directly into the next point, partnerships and MOUs, why they're important. And then process chronology, when you're supposed to have those MOUs and why it's important to have them before you write your grant. Very key. Also better positions you to get access to that funding, the 50% you can control. Organizational efficacy, and then I'll end with a coverage of the 3 different types of nonprofit organizations, have some discussion around that so you can analyze and diagnose which of those 3 your nonprofit organization either is or will be. And full disclosure, of the 3 different organizational types, you can be 1, 2, or 3. You can be all 3. So these are just types that you can belong to 1 or more categories, okay? So first, fundraising. What is fundraising? Quite frankly, it is exactly as the word suggests. You're raising funds for your organization. The reason why fundraising is very important in nonprofit organizations is because it gives them general operating revenue or non-restricted revenue, which is essentially important. Those of you in the room that said you either are a part of a nonprofit or you head a nonprofit or you're on the board of a nonprofit who's been in existence more than 5, 10 years, you all know best how important general operating dollars are for a nonprofit, specifically as you look to cultivate your talent, specifically as you want to get into different funding streams and level up the budget. You want to be able to have a staff and a team that demonstrates the organizational efficacy you need to get access to that funding, which is why a lot of times fundraising is another avenue when your grant picture is not quite covering all of the expenses you need. Why is it important? Again, it's key because it allows for you to have some flexibility. It dictates a lot inside the organization, and a lot of funders, as you'll see, again, some of the veteran organizations in the room, you all have written grants, you've written budgets, you know exactly what percentages for salary and fringe and all these other programmatic specific events and activities. There are very strict percentages that some funders only allow, so you gotta oftentimes fundraise to fill those gaps, okay? Restricted versus non-restricted funds. So restrictions, again, when you write a grant application, there's a restriction on the programmatic funds as they relate to the funding stream itself, right? So we talked about mission and vision alignment. We talked about matchmaking and making sure you're matched with the right funder. You always have to make sure that when you write out a grant and you have created and dictated what the budget will be, that the use of funds verbatim matches that. right? That's what's going to help you pass successfully audits, financial audits in the future, which open you up for more grants, right? As well as just speaks to your organizational efficiency and make sure that you're running in a way that is lawful, okay? And then, again, just bringing me laws, rules, and regulations. I am not an attorney and I am not an accountant, but I just want to bring attention to the fact that there are always going to be laws, rules, and regulations to fundraising. So you always want to be in constant contact with your organizational attorney. You want to be in constant contact with your board of directors. You always want to make sure that 2, 3, and 4 different sets of eyes of folks that are major decision makers in the actual nonprofit itself have seen what the fundraising activities look like before the activities are executed on. It's very important. Types of fundraising. So we all know about individual support, i.e. donations, same as corporate support, right? Digital campaigns. We've all seen people putting together fundraisers on Facebook, right? Direct mail, annual giving, and memberships. There are some nonprofits in the city that get a bulk of their operating revenue from memberships. Some can't. So they do some annual giving opportunities. They also do some major gifts, but earned income. There are some nonprofits in the city that offer low-cost or market-rate services to people or organizations, and then the revenue they raise goes towards the purpose of the nonprofit, right? I can think of one right now, Detroit, DC. So Detroit City Design Center, I believe, is one that offers architectural and space planning services to small businesses and even larger corporations, but the money they take goes directly into the purpose of why they exist as a nonprofit. Grants, obviously, we'll go through some of that. Major gifts, so $25,000 and up, most of the time constitutes as a major gift. And then some people have entire departments. Some of us who've gone to college and graduated, and we get contacted by the alumni folks and the alumni associations, and they're reaching out oftentimes to try to get some donations. So those are oftentimes ways that nonprofit organizations are able to reach their goals. Gift matching is through corporations. Some of us may work and have W-2 or full-time 9-to-5 jobs. Some of us may be in positions where our companies will allow for us to make a donation, and then they'll match it. So you donate $500 to Red Cross, they'll match your donation $500, and in essence, you get $1,000 donated to that organization in your name. Right? So these are opportunities to leverage, especially some of the nonprofits that have been around for a while. Gives you the opportunity to leverage those corporate opportunities to get more fundraising dollars in the door. And then lastly, events, and then we can go through event types. So we've all been to maybe some competitions, charity basketball game, runs, walks for a cause, auctions. Think about silent auctions. I've been to a few in the city and around the city where memorabilia is auctioned off. The proceeds go towards the nonprofit for some of their operating activities. Galas and parties, we all have probably either seen some of these or been to them ourselves. Art exhibits, sporting events, again, charity basketball game, charity football game, charity softball game, where folks lend their celebrity likeness, folks lend their popularity to maybe this game, and tickets are sold. That ticket revenue then goes to the organization and supports the operating activities. Concerts and a-thon events. So you think about call-a-thon events where you get a bunch of CPAs in a room to help communities who otherwise wouldn't have access to CPAs and help them with some of their tax needs or some of their yearly audit needs. And I'll go through the difference between taxes and audits for those who don't know, because there's a very key difference between that. Other fundraising options. So again, we talk about technology and how things have evolved over time. So we got some text-to-give opportunities where you can merely text a certain number to a certain number and give a certain amount of money. Those have been rising in popularity. Crowdfunding campaigns, we've all seen those as well. Silent auctions, it's a type of auction, but again, it still allows for people to auction off memorabilia or things that are valuable, and then those proceeds go directly towards the organizations for their programmatic activities. And then offer donation upgrade incentives, which again is if you donate $5, we appreciate that, but if you raise your donation to $25, you get a keychain or a t-shirt or something like that. So these are just some things that are available to you as a nonprofit where it offers you some kind of incentive for the folks that want to support your organizations to do so. Fund development. So fund development, why is it important? So now I want to get into the nitty-gritty of things because this is very important. And those who have been in existence for a long time, I'm sure they are aware of this, and maybe even some that have not been in existence for a long time. They also may be aware and they may not. Fund development is key, okay? Oftentimes, government entities or philanthropic families or philanthropic bodies or corporations, higher education institutions, they all get together and they come up with what is the cause du jour. And we see that the funding streams follow suit, right? So I just helped one of my clients in Q4 of last year secure funding because they were able to change their programming to a multi-generational whole family approach to poverty prevention, which is key because a lot of organizations, if you think about nonprofits nowadays, they have programs for children, then they have programs for adults, and then they have programs for foster parents. They may have programs for LGBTQ. They may have programs for kids with incarcerated parents, but they don't have across the board multi-generational whole family approach programming that tracks the outcomes simultaneously, which is what a lot of funding, specifically some funders are calling it next gen funding. That gets you, so if you're a nonprofit and you have fund and you have programs, but you may not be eligible for that funding because your programs don't quite align to it, right? So programmatic alignment is important because you could be doing everything you need to be doing to be as eligible for that funding stream as possible, except for articulating your organizational efficacy that lines up with what they're looking to see in those grant apps, which is a part of 50% you can control. Now, sometimes you can keep your programs exactly the same and just articulate them differently within reason just because it lines up with the mission and vision, but sometimes you can't. Sometimes you have to actually manage the organization. Sometimes you got to change who's on the staff, or you've got to change the duties of the folks that are already on the staff. Sometimes you have to change how your success measures, which Wendy's so eloquently brought up, but sometimes you have to change your success measures, right? The old way of tracking success may not be the new way of tracking success. Or well, we thought this data point meant that homelessness was going down. In all actuality, it's a completely different data point. But we've learned more, so our funding demands more from our nonprofits who are writing for these grants. So it's important that you always are invested and your team is invested in fund development. And it's very important because it keeps you ahead of the game because it's very competitive. Anybody who in here, so raise your hand if you think nonprofits are not a business. I think the people who may have raised their hand, put them down. Because it's very important to understand it's very competitive, just sometimes more competitive than private sector businesses, right? Very competitive. And there is a smidge of politicality built into it too, right? Because the 50% that you don't know about, you could be perfectly eligible, but in those meetings they say, well, this project sounds good, but we really want to help kids in this zip code range. This program is perfect, but it doesn't address this zip code range, right? And what we may see is, well, I mean, we could easily address that zip code range if we had known. I equate that to politicality. How are you supposed to know that we're only focused on this zip code? And that could have been something somebody who has some decision-making power came up with over their morning cereal and then came in and said, I think I want to focus on 48204, right? Right, and then there's also a key point too, right? Depending on how the governing body or the decision-making body is aligned with maybe some city departments. Maybe some philanthropic families say, well, I know what our mission and vision says on the website, but this is what I want to do, right? So you got to always be in the know, and I would even say invest in research in that way as well. Does it show up on paper? Not necessarily, but the outcome very well will show up on paper if you're able to strategically align. So we talked about restricted and non-restricted funds. If anybody needs more assistance with that concept, I'll say briefly that restricted and non-restricted. So restricted has direct ties to the budgets that are written and produced in grant applications. And when that money comes in, you had better spend that money exactly how you said you were going to spend it down to the penny. If you get to a point where you can't find money, you can potentially hire a consultant, right? You could probably hire me or Wendy, and we could conduct some forensic accounting and maybe try to find that money, given that no impropriety is in place and y'all haven't made a mistake and just spent the money. You know, if it can be found, we can find it. But why even incur unnecessary expenses and keep your financial controls in order, which is where a financial audit comes in. That's the difference between doing your taxes and a financial audit. A CPA may be able to do both, but they're very different. Doing your taxes is doing your taxes, straight up and plain. Doing a financial audit is doing an audit of your financial controls to make sure you are within compliance. Who has access to bank accounts? Who has the logins? Who holds a card? How many people sign off on check sign above a certain amount? If the check is above a certain amount, do you need 2 signatures and a board vote, or do you just need 2 signatures? These are key elements that people are going to ask you. And you can say, you've been selected for the grant. Now, if you could just send over your financial audit. And just as quick as you got pre-selected, you are now no longer in the running. Very important. And then obviously there are laws, rules, and regulations, and I always get a disclaimer. I am not an attorney. I am not an accountant. So you always want to make sure you have those folks on staff and have access to them, right? The savvy way to do it, and I'm sure anybody who's been in existence for a long time knows, have them on your board. Have them on your board, because in that way, now you hustling forward. My grandma would say you hustling backward if you got to pay them and you don't need to pay them. When you got to put them on your board, have them bring some funds and their expertise. It just makes sense. Relationships and strategic alliances. So there are 3 types of organizations. There are only 3 types of nonprofits. Listen to me very carefully. There are nonprofits with money, funding. There are nonprofits with people. And then there are nonprofits with programming. That's it. Now, can you be more than one? Absolutely. You can be a nonprofit with money and people. City of Detroit. You can be a nonprofit with programming and people, but need funding. A school. You can be a nonprofit with only programming. And then how does that dictate who your competitors are? Now, a little gem that I often give my clients, and I rarely do things for free. This is a very rare occurrence that I'm doing this for free. But a gem that I give my clients is, why keep them competitors? Form strategic alliances with the people that pose the most threats to you. It just makes sense. Get an MOU and work directly with them. Does it strengthen your grant application if you're with them? Yes. What's your chances of having a higher turnout and a more quality outcome if you're partnering with somebody that's already experienced? Much higher. So why keep them your competitor? It makes no sense. It just makes no sense. Okay? And then what are your potential strategic allies? You got to think intensely. You got to think intentionally about that. Fiduciary versus a partner, right? So a fiduciary, you operating in good faith, you get an agreement on the books, and maybe you're partnering with them because maybe your nonprofit tax-exempt status hasn't quite come back from the government, but your application is in. And you're in talks with some folks, and you can get an organization to act as your fiduciary because they have a long-standing reputation. They have financial audits on the books, and they've been in existence for a few years. That can be your fiduciary. But your partner doesn't necessarily got to see the money, touch the money, but they can be a strategic partner. Meaning, okay, I need a feeder for my programming now that I have funding and I have people. I need people to service my people with the funding that I have. You're a strategic partner. You add legitimacy to my grant funding application. Very key to identify these. Purpose of a partnership, it only enhances your outcomes. It only enhances your outcomes. Partnership is key. Partnership is key in all areas, right? We can just take it away from nonprofits for a minute. Partnership is key in all areas. But specifically with nonprofits, it only strengthens you. It only strengthens your ability to produce the outcomes you say you can produce. If you have partners who also, and not just any partner, right? You knew you go get somebody who's newer. Okay, that's a bad partnership, right? That's a very bad partnership. You having trouble keeping your audits clean, and you go get somebody, they never had an audit. Poor partnership. But you've got to be strategic about these partnerships. And then why? Why would they want to be partners with you, you ask? Well, maybe you got a staff that reflects some of the gaps in their talent. Maybe you have recency. Maybe their staff has in the evolution of their organization, it may be aging and they need to provide some energy and energize, and you may be connected in a way they're not. So there are different ways to strategically position your organization with partners, but just understand the importance of partnerships and the difference between a fiduciary and a partner. What's an MOU? Raise your hand if you do not know what an MOU is. Okay. An MOU is an acronym. That's a memorandum of understanding. Now, I know Wendy, my partner, talked about it earlier. But again, a memorandum of understanding. Let's be clear. And I usually don't hand out permission, but I'm going to hand out permission tonight and take it away. You may not do a partnership without an MOU. You may not. I've seen so many nonprofits claim that they're going to do partnerships with folks and then say, great. And Wendy and I were literally just talking about this. Say, great, let's see the MOU so we know exactly how this is going to go. And they say, MOU? Yeah, Memorandum of Understanding, because some people may not know the acronym. Memorandum of Understanding. Okay, so we're in trouble. Right? Because the MOU not just says that we're partners, but how are we going to partner? Who's responsible for what? Whose space are we using? Who's providing the candidates for this program? Who's providing the money? Who's providing the staff? How are we going to measure our success? Right? Very important. And we can talk more about it in the breakout session. Oh, and then one key point, process chronology. In other words, when do we do what? MOU before you write grant applications. MOU before you write grant applications. MOU before you write grant applications. Very key, okay? What's organizational efficacy? Well, folks that don't know the word efficacy, and I won't ask that because I don't want to get nobody putting their hands up slow. But efficacy is the ability to produce the desired outcome. In other words, you do what you set out to do. How can you prove that? Organizational is a self-explanatory word, right? It's of an organization. How does your organization do what it set out to do, and why is it important? How do you articulate it? I can combine all three of those into one answer. You need data points. 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 Quantitative, qualitative, and testimonials. What data supports that you indeed do what you said you were going to do and what you say you can do with the money you're asking us for? Who are you and what deems you qualified to get this money? Data. How do you collect the data? Obviously through surveys in a variety of different ways. You got to get creative about that. We can spend more time in our breakout session because I don't want to take too much of my partner's time here. The last thing I'll say is return on investment. Why is it important? Earlier I asked you if you thought a nonprofit was a business. I certainly think so. When you're dealing with, especially with major donors, philanthropic families, and even funders, you have to be able to articulate in neat, easily digestible components and small packages, this is what you get for this. With a donation of $150,000, we can feed 37,000 families in a 5-zip code area in 1 calendar year based on a wide variety of different metrics that your research supports. You got to be specific. Otherwise, what am I getting for my money and why am I giving it to you? Because I got 5 other nonprofits know exactly what they're going to be able to do with it, and you just telling me it's just for the love of doing good work, and that's just not good enough. We talked about 3 types of organizations. We talked about which one are you, how does it define your partners, and examples of each type. We talked about that. And thank you. Thank you for your time. I appreciate everybody listening. Hopefully you learned something, and we'll see you in the breakout sessions. I'm going to introduce Jason from, look, I'm about to say PNC, Fifth Third, Fifth Third Bank. Jason.
Thank you, Keith. Thank you, councilwomen. Thank you, everyone. I'm putting my clock up here. Actually, I need to do something else first. So Keith and Wendy talked about data points. So I'm about to create a data point, and I'm gonna take a selfie with y'all to prove that I was here. So this is evidence that I was here. And by my clock, I only got a couple minutes left. So I'm just gonna ask you a couple questions. As opposed to combing through what I was about to comb through, what is the most important part of being here tonight? What do you think? Information, money, finance, information to get the money, know-how. All y'all wrong. Yes, who said that? To build relationships. Because Wendy just dropped a bunch of stuff on y'all. Keith just followed that with a bunch of stuff. And y'all ain't gonna remember none of it. I don't care how many good copious notes you took. You ain't gonna remember none of it. Because I've been in this business for years, and some of this stuff I didn't even know. And I'm a funder, right? So what does that say? So by the time you get to me, you've already done everything that they said, right? And if you come to me and you haven't done it, guess what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna send you back to them, right? So these events are critical to understanding and knowing, learning what you don't know. And they're critical to finding the professionals that do know. Because how many of us know that business, anything that we do just about, is a team sport, right? We don't do any of this alone, right? Keith talked about strategic partnership. So I look at this as a strategic partnership because I showed up and I got in front of all y'all with all my contact information, and I ain't called nan one of y'all. But now all of a sudden, I'm in front of this full audience of people. I mean, this is phenomenal. And I haven't reached, Fifth Third didn't send not one email. Strategic partnership, right? So if you don't get anything else from tonight, you get Keith's contact information, you get Wendy's contact information, and by the time I get to the end of this thing, you'll have my contact information, all right? So what I wanted to talk about was funder alignment and making sure that you're aligning your project or your organization, the purpose, with the funder that you're seeking to get funding from. And in the banking space, what we look to fund is based upon the Community Reinvestment Act from a grant standpoint. Now, we have a couple different pools of money, but our main pool of money from a grant standpoint is based on the Community Reinvestment Act. And there's really 4 spaces that we work in the Community Reinvestment Act: affordable housing, small business, community development, and economic development. Affordable housing, small business, community development, and economic development. So I got a bunch of definitions up here, and this will be made available to you afterwards. You can refer back to it, but CRA goes back to when government was redlining. See, most folks thought the banks were redlining, but actually it was the government that was redlining. Housing and Urban Development Department was the cause of redlining. And I'm not gonna play that. So, and we talk about funding in low and moderate income communities, making sure that we have product, service, and investment available for folks in low and moderate income communities and in neighborhoods that are low and moderate income. And then I define low and moderate income, I'm gonna go through all of that. But where I really wanna get to, so there are CRA dollars when we talk about bank funding and the capital that's available from just about any bank that you will go to. There are basically these 3 buckets: loans, equity investments, and giving. And giving comprises of 2 different elements, both grants and sponsorships. Oh, I'm sorry. And then the third element is people, right? So we volunteer, like tonight, I'm volunteering to do this, right? So, and in those buckets, this is what the pie looks like. I'm gonna just let that sit for a minute. And for those of you who need a little bit of help reading this is my lending pool. Got a big old pool of dollars that I can loan money from. This is my investment pool. Big old pool of money that I can invest dollars from. And this itty bitty slice right here is my giving pool, right? So there's this misconception out there that the banks have all this money to give. No, that's not true. It's this itty bitty little piece right here. And of those 2, we look at, this is the grant funding, this is the sponsorship dollars. All right, so I'm just gonna let that marinate. I'm gonna go to, another thing that both Keith and Wendy referred to is making sure you know your why and making sure that your organization is set up in order to receive money, because money follows, it does not lead, right? You're not gonna get all that stuff done once you got the money, because it's a chicken and egg thing, right? Because without having all that stuff done, you ain't gonna get the money, right? So if money follows, it does not lead. And then I give some examples of stuff and da-da-da-da-da. But at the end of the day, it's all about relationships. So, there's my contact information. I thank you for your time and attention. And I think we're moving to breakout sessions next. We're the people that's running this thing. Yes, ma'am. Hold on one second.
So thank you all again for sitting through maybe what at first seemed like a little dry material, but I promise it's valuable. What we want to do before we break out into our sessions is answer any questions, because we went through all 20-minute sessions, all 3 of our 20-minute sessions without allowing for any questions. So before we break out into our sessions, our separate sessions, I wanted to be able to field some questions.
We need it from the mic, though.
Yep. So anybody who has a question, please step up to the mic, and then we'll be able to answer it directly. Anybody who has questions after this woman who's coming up, feel free to get in line right behind her if you want, or you can stay seated until you're ready to ask your question. That choice is yours. Okay? Ma'am.
Good afternoon. My name is Denise Lomax, and I'm from District 7. And I have a nonprofit organization that fits all that. But one of the things he talked about is about the key people that's on the staff, the board, and things like that. Now, I have a developer, but he's also,
It gets sticky.
He's what now?
he's a developer. He's my developer that's working with me. But he also has the credentials to for finances.
Okay.
So can he do both?
And specifically, can you ask, just for everybody in the room, can he do both of what?
Okay, can he be the developer and help developing the project, but also holding, the finances?
So let's back, because the finances is relatively a broad topic. So I'll touch it. I'll let Wendy touch it. That was your reminder to make sure everybody's cell phone is put on silent or vibrate, please, and thank you. And thank you, ma'am, for reminding everybody. We appreciate you. Thank you. Okay, so this is what I'll say, because when you ask the question, you talk about finances. So this is what I'll say, and this is what I've seen. And again, let me be clear. None of us are attorneys. None of us are accountants. So I want to be clear and give you that disclaimer before I answer, but I can tell you what I've seen and what my professional opinion is, okay? Okay, so if you have put your board together and you have one specific gentleman who has experience in development, and he has, when you say a finance background, do you mean he either has a degree in finance or he at one point worked in finance?
Both. He has a degree in finances.
Okay, very
And
good.
he's then he has his own company. He's a developer.
Sure. So what a degree in finance offers you, and I have a degree in finance as well, and then working in finance, and I've worked in finance as well, what that allows for you to do is be able to read financials well, interpret them, and then communicate them. If you're good at your job, you're able to communicate them in very simple bite-sized portions to folks who do not have a finance background. So it allows for you to have that deep understanding, but let me be very specific and clear here. Can he manage your books for you? Can he be a treasurer or replace an accountant? Absolutely not. Okay? I just want to be clear on that. All right? Did you have anything to add, or is that pretty much?
Well, I actually had a couple of questions about her question, but it looks like you got the answer you were looking for.
I think she was asking, could he do the taxes?
Because that's real sticky.
So you were asking if he can do the finances for the organization?
And be a developer, because he as a developer, he's coming in and he's developing the project, so he's getting paid.
Yeah. No. I would say no. Yeah, I would say he actually, and if he's getting paid, he can. There are a couple of conflicts of interest, it sounds like, are happening right now, and I think the number one is the fact that he's sitting on your board, and then also a developer, and then also getting paid.
I didn't have that information.
Yeah.
That
So
was the first thing I said.
yes.
Be on the board and get paid from you.
I think that it might be worth it for you to have a conversation with your board where you guys might need to figure out a different working relationship with him. So it's either that he sits on the board and maybe provides advice on development, or if you guys find that he's most valuable as a developer, respectfully asking him to step down from his role because it is a conflict of interest, but that's definitely a conversation that your board needs to get together and have with him.
Okay, thank you.
Just to add one thing, I don't want to have it be a negative turn to where he's not an asset. He's certainly an asset because he has a development background and he has the finance background. And if someone were to jerk you around or try to on either the development or finance, because you have someone on the board that has that specific acumen and background and experience, he can pick up on what others may not on the board and say, wait, we can't do business with this developer because I'm also a developer and I know he is full of you know what. Or we can't do business with this lender because they're trying to read our financials and make them fit a certain program that I know we shouldn't be rated for. We're not going to do business with that lender because I understand how to read financial statements. I know we should be rated differently. Let's shop our options. These things are going to be assets to you. Can he sit on the board and get paid? No. Big no conflict of interest, and that's why it's important for everyone to have financial audits because, once again, the audits themselves dictate to your organization and maintain that the financial systems in place, right? Who signs off on what, who can get paid, who can't, mixed with the so the bylaws and your audit support that people on the board shouldn't be able to get paid and can't get paid legally and lawfully from the actual activity of the nonprofit.
Which also speaks to that team player piece that I mentioned, and making sure that you have the right people on your team. Include the board in that. So if you can't hire an attorney, you should try to find an attorney to sit on your board who will be able to help you wade through some of these types of issues.
Okay, thank you.
Now, I just wanted to make a statement, which was reiterating what she said. If you have a person that's doing the funding and they're making the decisions, they wouldn't be unbiased. So it would be a conflict of interest, which is what you said. And you want to have a facet of all people of all avenues in their expertise. You may be my developer, but I looked in your bank account last night, you didn't have 25 cents. So you're there to make, I say that to say in language, you're there to make money because this is your business to make money. But quite naturally, you're going to make the decisions so that your company can make that money. And that is illegal in some of our conflict of interest, what's happening in the White House.
Well, and let's be clear.
I meant to just kind of
You
stick
threw
that
that
in.
White House
David
out there, yeah.
Kushner, okay,
Yeah, no, I
okay?
got you,
Him and his
I got
daddy,
you.
okay? So we all on the same page.
Right. But let's be clear. You may be somewhere to make money, but you are certainly not serving on the nonprofit board to make money.
And that is not your position. If you're the developer, you there to get
'Cause
that
the
building up and running, whichever that building may be physically, a structured building, or we all working together like what I need you to do when I leave here. Jennifer Williams is my name. God bless you and thank you for coming.
Thank you, Ms. Jennifer.
I am Fletcher Bland, and does your breakout sessions include Constitution and bylaws, which would include conflict of interest article in it?
So during my breakout session, will I offer that? I will not offer that, but I can offer you guidance and free resources of where you can find templates, and then you can customize it based on the organizational activity of your specific organization, for sure. Yes. I see some hands. Yeah, I see some hands. Everybody who has questions, just go ahead and line up at the mic, and then we'll take them as they come.
Okay, so hi, I'm Makia. Two things. Are there any more of these books? That's the first important question.
That may be a question that either of us can.
The BizGrid information is actually available online if you Google the BizGrid. So if I'm not sure if they ran out of books, but if they did, I do know that all of the information in that booklet is available on BizGrid's website.
Perfect. So my question is,
BizGrid, I'm sorry,
You're
ma'am.
fine.
BIZGRID. And yep, all of the resources in that booklet are readily available online.
okay. I struggle with board development. My program was recently just a summer program, and we're moving into an all year round program. So I struggle with board development. Are there any resources or tips that you could provide that will assist me with that?
I'll start, and then I'll pass it to Keith, since I know that was something that he covered. Typically, the advice I give to clients on developing their board is to start with the people that are closest to you, and the people that you know who are closest to you that have some, sort of professional experience. As most recently, I had a cousin who started a nonprofit, and she needed social workers, on her team because of the sort of work she was doing. And I have another cousin that happens to have a social work degree. So when she asked me for advice, I said, hey, our other cousin has a social work degree. That's someone who'd be great to sit on your board, because then she can give you advice from that perspective, having worked in the field and having studied it. So I would look at your circle of friends, your circle of family members, people that you know in the community who have degrees in certain fields, who are working in certain fields. But first and foremost, ask yourself, what kinds of experience and expertise is most valuable at my table? They talked about having a lawyer on your board. Are you dealing with issues that may push you into a lot of legal hurdles? In that case, look around your circle for people that have a law degree or law adjacent degree and make sure they are part of your table. So definitely, I would say the resources, most often we forget to network around us instead of thinking to networking up and look for big people to bring in. Sometimes the best people that you need are located right next to you, and you can't see them until you open your eyes. So I hope that helps.
That was very eloquent. I don't know how I can follow that. I'll answer your question from a slightly different perspective, because it sounds like she answered it from if you're building a board and you don't already have a board. For those that are in the room and say, okay, well, what if you already have a board and you're looking to develop that board? There are a wide variety of different ways, team building activities and things are available, some online. Some you may want to get a professional in if you've been in existence for a while and you feel like the board just may not be firing on all cylinders and you want to get some team building to create the synergistic connection from your board. Obviously, a team that works together works better than a team that works separately and then comes to the end at the table and say, well, this is what I did. Well, this is what I did. Those individual contributors don't really create as much value as those synergistic connections. I'll also say, too, create subcommittees on your board as well. So like a finance subcommittee may be the attorney that's on the board, the accountant that's on the board, and then the finance guy that's on the board. That's your finance subcommittee. And maybe that finance guy is a banker. Maybe that accountant is an H&R Block person. And then maybe that attorney literally just graduated maybe law school and just took the bar and hasn't quite been placed at a firm yet or whatever. You can still have those subcommittees, same planning, strategic planning subcommittee. That can be a developer. That can be somebody specialized in community development. That could be somebody who may be a community liaison from the community you're looking to serve. So think about subcommittees on your board as well as ways to develop an existing board and get more quality outcomes from the very same board you already have. Also looking to re-energize and create a little bit, just better outcome and better performance from the organization abroad.
Good evening. My name is Dewana. Jason mentioned 4 things: affordable housing, community something. What was that?
Community development.
Okay.
Affordable housing, small business.
And economic.
Community economic development.
Okay. With that being said, are you talking about you can get grants for these things, and affordable housing is something that I'm interested in because I want to help the homeless young women that don't have a place to stay, because I'm trying to understand that. So can you get a grant for this type of thing?
Yes.
And what would community development be?
It's kind of a broad kind of catch-all. So revitalization, neighborhood revitalization and stabilization, and things of that nature.
Okay, and another question I have a nonprofit, but I don't know how to get a grant, so that's why I'm here. Now, are you going to talk about, I do events, like I write plays and fashion shows and stuff like that, and I still wind up with not a whole lot. So with that, I guess I can get a grant for writing plays or something of that nature.
So back to your community development question, this actually may help you with the answer to this question as well. There are 4 major areas of community development, right? There's human-centered development, organizational-based development, physical or place-based development, and then economic development, right? Mm-hmm. So depending on, right, so you write plays. Mm-hmm. If that in your estimation and is built into your vision and your mission of your nonprofit organization, which I assume you've either already created or will soon create, right?
I have one.
Okay, so if you already have that, then the purpose and programmatic offering of your nonprofit needs to be geared towards counteracting or intervening in an issue that's plaguing a certain community. And then you'll have to dig up some respectable data points and articulate why your ask is justifiable. In other words, yeah, that's, and I'm not trying to be personal, I'm just giving you an example. Yeah, that's great, you do plays, but how is that positively impacting the community? I'm sure it is. You just got to be able to effectively communicate it with data, right? And then your success measures. So the data supports it, and then based on that data, we're going to track the success of our programming using these measurements, and then we even going to revisit in a year or so we can come up with a strategic, continuous improvement strategy to do even better than we did the first year, which is why we may be asking for 2 years of funding, right? That gives you that justifiable ask. We can talk about that more in the breakout session.
Okay,
But
and my last question, I'm sorry. Donations from restaurants for events, like how you can get chips and pop or whatever. Are you going to talk about that?
yeah, so I'll talk about some of that in the fundraising and fund development, but just real quickly, that's referred to as a sponsorship.
Oh,
So
okay.
you can have like a food sponsor for your event, and then that sponsor sponsors the food. So whatever the cost of like tally up what the cost is of the food, and then present that to a potential food sponsor, and then they'll say, we have an allowance of $500. You say, great, $500 will be able to give snacks and light refreshments to 75 people during my event.
How do you find those people?
Let's talk more in the breakout session. You're welcome.
Hello, everybody. Hi. For the ones that don't know me, I am John, and for the ones that do know me, I'm very sorry. I'm here because I didn't want to miss the meeting. I thought it was more important. I thought Brenda Jones was going to be here, but she's not. But it is interesting for me, but I have one question. With all these consultants and bankers and capitalists, what kind of grant do I need to provide public toilets for our homeless people downtown Detroit so they don't pee like dogs and cats on trees, electrical poles, and buildings? Who's going to finance me to provide some public toilets downtown Detroit? You guys set the rules for all these businesses for sanitation, yet our city has no public toilets. How can we have a beautiful city like Detroit, not a single public toilet there? And I don't mean free toilets, but we do need, with all the bankers and capitalists and consultants, we do need public toilets. Where do I need to go to apply for a few $1 million to build some toilets for the city of Detroit? Can the banker or the consultant help me?
So thank you for your question. I think it's a great question. And thank you for those that applauded. Because
I know the Americans keep bragging about going to the moon, but Detroit is down here on Earth, and here we use toilets. We don't give a damn about what happens to the moon or Mars, like that son of a gun Donald Trump wants to. He has money to go to Mars, but we have no money for toilets.
You're killing me.
We need toilets. I thank you very much.
I agree with you. Now,
don't worry about the moon and Mars and let's worry about him down here.
So 2 things. First, thank you for your question. What I'll say too is before I get started, Brenda Jones actually was here when the event started, and she addressed everyone and thanked everyone for being here.
Thank you. Thanks.
Secondly, the reason why we're doing what we're doing is because the city has about a $2.1 billion with a B dollar budget for RFPs and contracting, and the problem that we're experiencing is that over 70%, 70, is done with nonprofits and businesses outside of the city. Why? Not because necessarily it's by choice, but because our nonprofits and our startups and small businesses who want to contract and do some of the work you're talking about don't quite have the information that we gave today to properly piece together a justifiable ask in the form of an RFP, which is why we're here today. And that's right from the capitalist's mouth. Now, what I will say, too, is that there are opportunities with the city and private entities like banks, like community investment funds, like private funders that act alongside banks, so Invest Detroit, Detroit Developmental Fund, Michigan Women's Foundation. I could go on, right? There are a lot of different opportunities to get funding and grant funding to do some of the projects you want to do. But it's first important for us to teach the proper ways to navigate the processes to get to the funding, which is why we're doing what we're doing today for free, might I add.
So we have money for public toilets. When can we get the money so we build public toilets downtown?
I am not a representative of City Council, so I can't say for sure that there's
So
money
I need to
for...
contact the representative?
Absolutely.
I thank you so much.
Of course.
God bless you all. Thank you, thank you. And again, I am John for the ones that don't know me, and very, very sorry for the ones that do know. Thank you. God
That's
bless
all
you.
good, baby. My man John, that's my man. I never forget John. That man in Torrance.
Okay. First of all, is this, I'd like to thank everyone. I'd like to thank everyone for giving this free information. It's difficult to get. Thank you again. My name is Nadine Murchison, and I have a nonprofit organization that will impact my neighborhood to a great degree. I've spent a lot of time dealing with elderly as well as youth, and we need to work on that. And your information is going to give me success because it's going to impact my decisions and my neighborhood. First of all, one of the questions I want to say to you is this: what is a good board? How many members would you say? Just, I know it's a guess, but that's the only question I want to know. What is a good board?
Yeah. So I can give basic parameters for that. There's no, I don't think that there's necessarily, quote, a good board. I can tell you what you can avoid common pitfalls. I always say between 5 and 9, but only odd numbers. The reason I say odd numbers is because you never want a stalemate.
No,
you never want to vote 3-3 and be 3-3 for 3 months and never get anything accomplished.
Right.
So you always have an odd number. That's my first. I would say 3 is too few because it's easily to sway one person to get you what you want. Now you got 2 out of 3 votes. Right. So I always say between 5 and 9. When you get to 11 and 13, if you are not a large board and your board is not bringing in, because most boards are tasked with the responsibility of bringing in funds for the organization. Right, so if you see Dan Gilbert on the board of an organization, oh, he bringing $250,000 to the organization or something like that, right? Easily. Same thing with some of the more prominent folks. And that's a concept that we all should grasp, though. It may not be $250,000, but it may be $150, $200, $500, $1,000, and it may not have to come out of their pocket, but they need to be tasked with tapping people in the community as well as giving of their acumen and their expertise and their gifts to assist the nonprofit in its strategic direction. Okay, so I would say between 5 and 9 if you're new, or if you're a smaller nonprofit based on your budget, meaning, you know, less than $1 million, I don't see why you need more than 9 people. And if you do, keep it odd numbers.
Thank you very much.
She had a question. She's the authority. Between 5. You back? You back?
Yeah, I'm back.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth. I'm former teacher of Detroit, but right now I'm a behavior consultant. And my question is, I'm working with a nonprofit, and we're trying to do crowdfunding. So what level, at what point in the organization do you recommend crowdfunding? And then from my understanding, it's somewhat connected to finance technology, like the GoFundMe and the other applications. How do you bridge that gap where it's more personable?
So I think I'll answer the first part of that question, and maybe I'll default to Keith on making it personable. But in terms of fundraising, anytime you're ready and willing to do fundraising is a good time to do it. A lot of what I talked about in my presentation was making sure that you have an organization that's worth funding as far as, you know, philanthropy and big foundations goes. And one thing that foundations love to see that a lot of organizations lack is a good fundraising strategy. They want to know that you have not just yourself, but a good established board of directors or set of volunteers that are ready and willing to go out and raise money, and you being able to show that you have the capacity to do that on your own without their funding at the table only makes you look stronger. So, but even if you're not thinking of it in terms of getting money from a funder being your ultimate goal, at any point that you're ready to start raising money for your organization is a good time. So don't think, oh, I have to have this in order, that in order. And especially with crowdfunding, I'm sorry, have a little bit of a cold. With crowdfunding, that's a good time to tell your story and get people excited about who you are and establishing a strategy that says, you know, hey, I'm trying to start this amazing organization. These are our goals, and this is what we're asking for support to do. And crowdfunding is a great way to get established and to do that. And some organizations I see find it more effective than that individual fundraising where you send emails or snail mail because you can reach a larger number of people faster. So at any point that you're ready to start, I say go for it.
I'll just say 20 seconds real quick. So how to make it personable, I can talk to you about some things that I've done before with some organizations, very simple, but creating like picture frames in Facebook that they can maybe swap out their actual profile picture and add that picture frame to it around it. I supported such and such initiative. That can be available as soon as somebody clicks to donate, right? Also, as far as board of directors are concerned, you want to make sure that your board of directors and even your staff are sharing your crowdfunding campaign. Because if it didn't happen online, it didn't happen nowadays. And as people, even as banks, if they look into your nonprofit organization and they see that the board of directors is not even reposting your crowdfunding page, it's not even donating, they're not even liking it, their names aren't showing up anywhere. Well, how much support do you truly have from your board, and why would I give you money if your own board doesn't support you? So you got to think about optics too. Also, think about your end stakeholder. If you know that the community you serve is full of maybe elderly people who could give less than a you-know-what about Facebook, then it may be a challenge for you to put together a crowdfunding campaign on a social media platform or online, period. And I'm not suggesting that you would or anybody would, but always think about the end stakeholder and who you're looking to get the funding from, because that can dictate what kind of method you use to fundraise, Yeah.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
We will not perish here because of a lack of knowledge, will we? My name is Alice Banford. My question is for you, Mr. Crispen. Can you quote me that dollar amount again, and that billions of what's available?
Oh, from the city, $2.1 billion and 70%.
$2.1 billion. Okay. And that doesn't disclose you, Mr. Paulatier, that little piece of pie. I'm gonna call you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Joyce Brooks from Bethune Council, and I would like to know, of the three presenters here, for community groups, who would be the best person that I would talk to? Because there's not enough time to go to each person.
What exactly is your community group trying to do? Maybe that can help us find out exactly who's best.
Well, one of the things we are interested in is doing like neighborhood parks, because we have so many vacant lots, and we're having a lot of trouble with the city and getting some of the houses torn down, because we have like 7, 8 lots on a block. One house that we've been trying to get down for the last 5 years. Okay. But if we could get some of these houses torn down, and we could make some community parks where seniors could feel safe enough to come out right in their neighborhood, play cards, put a picnic table, gazebo, or whatever. Some places where we have 3 or 4 lots, make basketball courts, get the kids out the street. Yeah. Where we could also be able to maybe do some gardening. Okay. If we could get some people there. And the other thing is, who would we speak with for neighborhood investment? We have a lot of vacant buildings on commercial streets that we would like to see someone come in and to revitalize, because at one time we had a lot of businesses.
Yeah, so I would say this to you. Actually, Wendy has worked at development firms before, specifically firms that develop physical space, and it sounds like that's exactly what you're asking about. So Wendy's breakout session is going to be key for you. Okay. I would also say Jason here, who is, obviously he spoke about Community Reinvestment Act funding. So I think that what you're also talking about is that investment in the community, which it sounds like he would also be a good asset for you. I'm not saying I would love to have the conversation with you, but if you're trying to maximize your time, Wendy, number 1. If you have time left over, Jason, number 2. And the reason I say that is because Wendy can probably help you get ready for Jason.
Okay, thank
Okay?
you.
Okay.
Hello, how you doing? Good, man. My name is Demetrius Young, and I don't really know why I'm here because I don't know none of them about a 501c3 and nonprofit. I don't have none of that.
Well, that's why you're here.
But I was homeless, and I used to be standing on the corner collecting change. I hit the lottery. I bought a 18-unit condominium, and I've been fixing it up by myself for the last 3 years, and I've been filling it up with homeless people because I'm running out of funds because I do odd jobs and stuff like that, and I can't do it because I don't charge no one in there, and I have at least 15 people's there now.
Actually,
and I've been doing it all off faith. I don't know how I've been feeding this, but we all there together. Wow. And and everybody keep telling me about 501c3s, and I've been going to city council meetings and stuff like that, and it been real hard on me. That I gotta, it been real hard. So I want to know, like, what's the first step for me to try to figure out how to get any type of fundings? Because right now it's all on me.
Formation. Yeah. Forming the organization, right? So you build the organization. Basically, you're building it with assets already.
Yes.
Right? And so the tools that these two guys can help you to develop, meaning the infrastructure of your organization, will then set you up to be able to come to funders. Just about any funder would be willing to take a hard look at trying to help you with that project.
Okay.
And one of the things that I'll say too is your story is absolutely so compelling. It's so compelling that I think that a lot of folks who have nonprofits, who want to create nonprofits, absolutely positively wish they had a story a quarter as compelling as the story you just told to us. So forming your nonprofit, getting your tax exempt status, piecing together a grant application, and getting some funding, you've done the hard part already. This is just paperwork, okay?
I do have some buildings and houses that I could donate.
Sir, what's your name again? I'm sorry. I know, and I was away when you were sharing the beginning.
Demetrius Young.
Yes. What's your name?
Demetrius Young.
Demetrius?
Yes.
Demetrius, come see me after this whole thing clears out. I would love to talk to you because I caught the tail end of what you were saying, and based on the advice they're giving you, you are the ideal client that I like to work with. To be 110% honest, I have so many people who come to me and say, I have this idea of this thing that I think I want to do, but I don't know anything about it, and I need you to help me put it together from start to finish. And I appreciate it so much more when people come to me and say, hey, I'm already doing this work. I've been doing this work, and I'm dedicated to this work. How can you help me organize the work I've been doing? And that's a much more compelling approach to take to a funder like Jason, because then it make you make it easy for us to sell it. He gonna be waiting for your application. So Demetrius, let's make sure that we talk.